Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is a history of Europe. Now, Europe is the western part of the Eurasian landmass, largest landmass on Earth. So Europe has always been connected to Asia and had strong, since it shares that landmass. Now, Europe is the borders of Europe. On the west, you have the Atlantic Ocean, the Arctic Ocean to the north, the Ural Mountains to the east, Russia, which divide Russia. Russia is actually the western part of Russia or west of the Ural Mountains is part of Europe, and in the east of the Urals is Asia. So Russia is both European and Asian. And then in the south, the Mediterranean Sea, and in the southeast, the Black Sea, the Caucasus Mountains, and the Caspian Sea. Now we call Europe's called the West, capital W. And then as opposed to the East, which would be Asia. Another name is the Occident, and then the Asia would be the Orient. And Western civilization has had actually a very strong impact on the world as we know it today, in different forms. Languages, English, which comes from Great Britain, language of really the international language, and spoken in the U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, Jamaica, Bahamas, Guyana, Belize. So, and religion. Actually, Christianity did not originate in Europe, but it was spread around the world from Europe, by European countries and Europeans. So, and then in terms of international business, the European countries really established the world as we know it through their conquest. The six European countries, which basically conquered the world: Spain, Portugal, Great Britain, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Excuse me, these muscle nuts. Anyway, so now some of the geography of Europe. Actually, Europe is you could say a one big peninsula, and then it has smaller peninsulas within it. The Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal. Italy itself is a peninsula. Up north, Norway and Sweden, those are two together. They're kind of like a peninsula. And then Denmark is another peninsula. And then one of the most interesting, the Balkan Peninsula in the southeast, which is the world's most unknown and very large and a very fat peninsula. Very interesting countries there. And then the mountains of Europe between France and Spain, the Pyrenees, and the Apennines in Italy. The famous Alp mountains, or the Alps, mostly in Switzerland and Austria. And then, these famous European cities: London, England, Paris, France, Madrid, Spain, Berlin, Germany, Rome, Italy. Of course, the Roman Catholic Church, very international, largely in North and South America and around the world. And of course, that's based on Rome, Italy. The name going back. We'll talk a lot about that. And so, and other parts. Then some of the islands. Actually, Great Britain itself is an island. England, Scotland, and Wales. Ireland is an island. Iceland. Now, I would add Greenland. So on my map here, it's not included, but you can't really put Greenland in North America because it really is connected to Europe, although pretty kind of far away. And then the islands in the Mediterranean: Corsica, where Napoleon was from, Sardinia and Sicily, Greek islands, Crete, and so forth. So anyway, now for me, my version of European history, I would actually go back 3,000 years ago, outside of Europe, to the people of Israel, the establishment of ancient Israel, the Jewish people. And that history is basically the Old Testament of the Bible. This people that was founded by Abraham, and then his son Isaac, and his son Jacob, and then there was the famous Joseph, who was, you've heard the stories of him when he was enslaved, and then he, as a result of Joseph's life, the Israelites moved to Egypt and became enslaved, and were led back to Israel by Moses, and established ancient Israel and King David established Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and Solomon. And you say, well, why are we talking about an area outside of Europe? Well, for two reasons. One, because Christianity came from the Jewish people, from Israel, because Jesus Christ was Jewish, and all the disciples were Jewish. And then Christianity spread from Israel into Europe, and then from Europe around the world. And then the other reason is eventually the Jewish people were dispersed out of Israel and mostly immigrated to Europe, and well, eventually later to North America. But large numbers of Jewish folks living in Europe and Russia, and made a major contribution to Europe. And of course, were famously persecuted, 6 million murdered in the Holocaust, and really mistreated. Very talented people and amazing people, the Jewish people. Now, moving forward, around this time, we're going about 1000 BC, well, more, maybe 900 or 800 BC. Ancient Israel really became established. Ancient Greece. Now, again, circular theory historians believe that ancient Greece was a remnant of Atlantis, which was one of the two great continents in the last High Age, the other being Lemuria in Asia. And because the thing is, the ancient Greeks were amazing people, had tremendous talent, very smart, and in different fields. They invented democracy, the type of government that's followed in many countries. The Olympic Games, these amazing philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And then Homer, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and many more, Demosthenes and Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, and many others. And so they were very talented people, and this is in southeastern Europe, the ancient Greeks. Extremely talented, amazing people. And actually, the ancient Greeks, you could say, really played a major role in the foundation of Europe and what became Europe because of their knowledge, their learning, and their talents. They're down. Of course, there's a famous movie, 300, where Sparta, one of the Greek city-states, made war or was at war with Persia, great empire to the east. And the Persians were kind of puzzled by these Spartans, and they said, who's your king? And they said, well, who do you obey? They said, we obey the law, because in the Persians, they just knew obeying their king, whatever the king wanted. Of course, the point is that the Greeks, had democracy, where elected leaders have to be accountable to the law. Now, the downfall of the ancient Greeks was the Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta, the two great Greek city-states, went to war. It was like a Greek civil war. Very unfortunate. Really weakened ancient Greece. Now, moving forward, about 500 BC, around that time, the Roman Empire became established, and actually they conquered the Greeks. Of course, Rome, this would be the city of Rome in Italy, and much of Europe was part of the Roman Empire, and North Africa. So this would be Spain, Portugal, France, not Germany. They never were able to conquer what became Germany, of course, Italy, into the Balkan Peninsula, and in actually England as well. So the Roman Empire, which was a great empire, and actually the Roman Empire was a joint project, I would say, with the Greeks, because the Greeks were so talented. Many of them were enslaved, but they were very talented people. Now, the Romans were good in terms of engineering, building roads, and they established a fine empire, which had the rule of law. So they were doing very well. And so moving forward, eventually, ancient Israel was a part of the Roman Empire, and so when Jesus Christ lived his life, he was born, and Israel was a part of the Roman Empire. And then Christianity started about 2,000 years ago, and then this amazing religion that was very, very popular with people who were spiritual. And actually, the ancient Greeks had a religion called Stoicism, and the ancient Greeks really joined Christianity in large numbers. It was very appealing to them. One of the things that happened early on, one of the issues is that Christians would refuse to serve in the military. And this was like, a big problem for the Romans. They thought, oh my God, this is bad. We have to have an army, and you can't have an army without soldiers. And the Christians said, no, we can't. We won't do that. And so they were persecuted partly for that. Of course, later Christians came to the belief that it was okay to serve in the military, that there was a just war. So that was, but early on there was this persecution. One of the ironies is Marcus Aurelius, a great Roman leader, one of the Caesars, and he's depicted in the movie Gladiator at the very beginning. He's elderly, and he's murdered by his son Commodus. Very tragic. And But he's talking to, Russell Crowe, who's the guy who, what's his name, Maximus, don't know his name. Anyway, he was talking about his life. He said, oh, what will they say about me after I'm gone? Well, what will they call me? A warrior, a philosopher. And the thing is, Marcus Aurelius was a great Stoic, and he persecuted Christians because they wouldn't join the Roman army. That was too bad, because he would have been very sympathetic to Christianity because he was a Stoic, and the Stoics were very spiritual, moral people. Hey, so anyway, eventually the Romans decided to stop persecuting the Christians. In fact, I believe it was Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, and Christianity became the state religion in the Roman Empire, which is like mostly in Europe. And well, then things changed, at least for Christianity. The high ideals of loving God and loving your neighbor. This is very simple, but actually, not many people have been able to do it. And then Christianity really became weak. But the ideals were always there. So as the years were passing, eventually the Roman Empire fell. But in the East, the Eastern Empire remained, and actually became the Byzantine Empire, which was a Greek empire. The Greeks, and this would be in what's now Greece and Turkey and the Balkan Peninsula, and areas around the Middle East, eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea. But in the West, the Roman Empire was gone, and then you had these small countries, and eventually out of that emerged the modern countries of Europe, France and Spain, Portugal, Great Britain, and so forth. And early on, and then now again, now another thing we need to bring up is Islam. In the 600s, the great saint named Muhammad lived his life in Arabia and started a religion called Islam, which spread like wildfire. All of Arabia became Muslim, and across North Africa. In fact, Spain and Portugal were under Muslim rule for centuries. And finally, the Muslims were stopped in France, and Islam spread like wildfire into the Central Asia, into India and Southeast Asia, South Indonesia, and into the Philippines. And so there was this conflict between Europeans and Muslims. It led to, in fact, Jerusalem and Israel were under Muslim rule. So you had the Crusades in the Middle Ages. This is like 1,000 years ago, and so forth. And the Christians with the Christian armies would go to trying to capture and have political control over Jerusalem. And for a time they succeeded. Mostly they failed. And they wanted, Jerusalem was the pilgrimage city, the holy city for Christians. So they wanted to be able to go there. And eventually they were able to, work out arrangements with Muslims so they could travel to Jerusalem. Okay, so anyway, and then the Mongol Empire, which was basically China and Russia, the Mongols actually threatened Europe, and the Hungarians stopped them. They were, the Mongols, there was a Mongol invasion of Europe. They were defeated. The Mongols did not conquer Europe. They already had a big enough empire. The thing is about the Mongols had a bad reputation, for violence, but they created you could travel, and there was in safety. In the old days, small kingdoms, you go from one kingdom to the next, and then the next kingdom, what's going to happen to you, because maybe they're enemies, and maybe you get in trouble. Marco Polo was a famous Italian, I believe. He traveled to Asia in the Mongol Empire, and he came back. The thing is, the Asians had, there was more wealth in Asia, and they had these things that Europeans liked, like silk and spices. So by 1400s, and there was the silk trade, the trade, overland trade. Now that's a long distance, but traveled by caravan and very costly and very slow. So some Europeans thought, well, why can't we? Let's see if we can find out a way to travel to Asia by water. So this began the age of exploration, and actually the European conquest of the world. And the Spanish and Portuguese were the first, and they traveled around. Actually, the Portuguese traveling around Africa, trying to find an ocean route to Asia, so that they could more easily purchase spices and silk from the Chinese and from the other Asians, what's now the Indonesians, Spice Islands. And so and then the Spanish thought, and Columbus, let's see if we can go west around the world. That's why it led to Columbus arriving in America, first the Bahamas, and then eventually the conquest. They didn't even know that there was these two continents, North and South America. So this is the colonial era, Spanish Empire. Well, they established this huge empire, and what's now southwestern United States and Mexico, Central America, and South America. The Portuguese in Brazil, and then later in Mozambique and Angola in Africa, and the British all over what's now the U.S. and Canada, and a huge strip from Egypt to South Africa in Africa, India, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand, and then so the British, the colonial era, but only 6 European countries were involved. Belgium taking the Congo, a huge part of Africa, Central Africa, and Holland, Indonesia, huge country, largest archipelago in the world. So we're moving forward into the 1500s and 1600s, and then you had the Enlightenment in the 1700s. See, the Europeans, they didn't have, there was a lot of ignorance, and they didn't have really good governments. The British they had democracy, or they limited the king's power. But the Enlightenment was an amazing thing in the 1700s, because people thought we need to learn, we need to be more knowledgeable. And actually, the Christian Catholic Church had really tried to suppress learning. Anyway, there was tremendous, and actually the Europeans were inspired by the ancient Greeks to learn, and they did. There was tremendous learning in the 1700s. It led to the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, with the use of where Europeans pioneered the use of coal as a heating source, and steel as a tremendous building material for machines, and eventually later railroads and so forth, and to make textiles the first major, and the factory production. And this really created, the Spanish and Portuguese had established slave empires, but this was really the economic power. The British really made them a tremendous power. And actually, Great Britain became the most powerful country in the world, greatest empire in the world, and it was really based on democracy and the rule of law and reason. This was I believe, the key to British success. That you had to have an accountable government, and you have to learn, and you have to use reason in arguments, not just might makes right. That's not good leadership. You don't get good things happening. From that. So we're getting to the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution, and then eventually the entire conquest, or almost the entire conquest of Africa in the late 1800s. The French in West Africa, the British, as I said, north to south from Egypt to South Africa, the Portuguese in the south. Actually, Germany was getting involved in. Germany was many small countries, and it finally became united in the late 1800s. Italy as well. Italy had been divided, and then once Germany became united, it had its established colonies in what's now Cameroon in Africa, and in Micronesia and Tanzania in East Africa. And then getting into the 20th century, now Germany really over the centuries, Spain and Portugal's power had waned. They still had their empires. The British really were the superpower, and then they were challenged by France. A lot of wars between Spain and France for a time. Under Napoleon Bonaparte, France conquered Europe, and the French Revolution, the ideals of the French Revolution played a major role in changing the world and having the need for good government, and that poor people should be respected, that the rich people aren't superior. And actually this inspired Filipinos to fight for freedom in the Philippines against Spain when these ideals came to them. Now, into the 20th century, Germany twice challenged Great Britain for world power. It was defeated twice in the 2 world wars. And the United States played a role in the First World War. And actually, Germany was really punished. It was unfortunate how they were mistreated. Germany was expressing itself, very talented people. In fact, before the Second World War, Germans won more Nobel Prizes than any country on earth. And then, of course, the Second World War is very unfortunate when Germany, very talented people, very tragically, was taken over by the radical politics of the Nazis and Adolf Hitler. You had the horrendous Second World War, which also involved Asia, because the Japanese were trying to establish an empire. Both Japan and Germany were trying to establish empires. This is the end of the colonial era. Both were defeated, of course. And then as soon as the war ended, you had the Cold War, where Russia, very strange, Russia became a superpower and had this radical philosophy that was appealing to a lot of people. Communism. People thought, this is great, where poor people will get. There's always been the suffering of the poor and the difference between the rich and the poor, which was exacerbated by the Industrial Revolution, when you had incredible wealth created, guys like John D. Rockefeller from Cleveland, Ohio, richest man in the world. Then you had these poor workers, especially having tough times in factories. Anyway, Russia became communist, had this philosophy where total control of the government will control everything, total control of the economy, and no freedom. It's actually slavery. It sounds good, but it's actually terrible. But it's very seductive and popular, people, especially among the poor. So they were spreading this philosophy, and actually the Russians imposed communism on Eastern Europe. So there was a standoff between the United States and Russia in Europe, because the Russians dominated Eastern Europe, and there was a horrible danger of nuclear war, because the Russians eventually they got these German scientists and were able to develop nuclear weapons themselves. And they spread they were spreading China became communist, and there was war in Korea and Vietnam. The U.S. led the forces against communism, trying to stop communist takeovers in different countries. Eventually, the Soviet Union fell, and so Russia is no longer communist, so they have this problematic dictatorship today. And today in Europe, there's been, actually, I think the challenge today, large numbers of Muslims immigrating to Europe from these troubled Muslim countries, where they're really problematic governments and economies. And large numbers in Europe, and there have been there are real challenges in Europe today with trying to get along. And I think the Europeans were kind of traumatized by the Second World War. And the thing is, the Nazis gave racism a bad name, and that was actually a good thing, because people thought, nobody wanted to be a Nazi after, nobody wanted to be a racist. Racism was popular. And after that, they thought, no, this is horrible. So we've gone through the whole history of Europe, and we'll see. And they have all these different countries. There's, again, like I said, become very international. And Germany, of course, even though it lost the two world wars, it really dominates Europe today because of its economy. They're hardworking people, talented people, Germans. And now there's the European Union, where they've become united and tried to have economic, easier trade and so forth. Of course, the Roman Catholic Church, Rome, is still, Rome, very international. And Rome is like the holy city for Catholics, along with Jerusalem. So a lot of people a lot of Catholics like to visit Rome and the Vatican. And then, so you have Spain went through hardships, lost its empire, had the Francisco Franco dictatorship. They're doing a lot better today. France is, having these challenges, cultural problems with large numbers of Muslim immigrants and challenges and so forth. And then, of course, in the Balkan Peninsula, Yugoslavia broke up in recent decades. Now you have these small countries, Serbia, and so forth, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, and so forth, Bosnia, and now part of Turkey is actually in Europe. And then the other countries, now you have the Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in the far northeast, which were part of the Soviet Union, are independent, they're kind of worried. Well, people are worried about the Russians, and actually Russia has taken over eastern Ukraine, part of Europe. So the people are worried about that. There's always things, and the communist era has ended, but these former communist countries in Eastern Europe continue to struggle because they're still kind of haunted by that. It's like a hangover from communism. And large numbers of Africans traveling across the Mediterranean Sea, refugees, because severe problems in their home countries. Libya had Muammar Gaddafi, the pretty bad dictator, and then since then things seem to have deteriorated. So, let's see, Poland is, I think Poland's doing better. One of the ironies of the Second World War, war was fought because of Germany invaded Poland, but at the end of the war, the Russians took Poland, basically. So the freedom of Poland was not achieved by the Second World War. I read a great biography of Charles Lindbergh, who was against American participation in the war. He saw the Second World War as a Peloponnesian War of Europeans destroying themselves, and he saw Russia becoming more benefiting, which is exactly what happened. It's like we traded German influence for Russian influence. German influence would have been better because Germans are very, very talented people. So different countries, Holland, we talked about, small country, Belgium, Switzerland. I was over there a couple years. Austria, the Austrian Empire is long gone. They had a pretty big empire. They were a Germanic people. Czechoslovakia broke into two, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Now in the countries in southeastern Europe, there's Albania, which was actually a traditionally Muslim country, and then the communist atheist era, where religion was suppressed. Bulgaria, I think, has been struggling. Romania, now they can all leave because of the end of the communist era. before they couldn't leave. Now, large numbers of immigrants to the U.S. from Eastern Europe now. In fact, where I'm living, our apartment building, we have a lot of Albanian immigrants because a lot of them are coming because of looking hard times in their home country, and they're looking for opportunity, a better life in America. And in Scandinavia, in the far north, Norway and Sweden, large numbers of Muslim immigrants. Finland, Iceland, so it's all very interesting. Ireland's doing much better. A lot of Irish immigrants to the United States. Huge. St. Patrick's Day is a big thing over here. And so you wonder about everything, about what's going to happen. But certainly these European countries Europe has played a major role in world history, and will continue to do so because of language and culture and religion. And, people around the world study the ancient Greeks and are inspired by them. And a number of countries were created by Europeans. The United States is really a European creation through the leadership of Great Britain, but contributions. White Americans have ancestors from many countries in Europe, Canada as well, Australia, New Zealand. Excuse me. And so Europe has had a very strong influence on the world. The world is more and more international. But all these different countries, very interesting. As I said, the Spanish Empire, and in Europe today, soccer or football is the popular sport, and so we'll see. Hopefully, we can all get along with each other. Every country has had a different strengths and weaknesses. Hopefully, we can learn from the strengths of other countries, and we can change for the better. We're headed for a better world, and European countries played a role. Certainly, they suffered in the Second World War. Very, very tragic with the misuse of technology as military technology gained prominence. In fact, the airplane, first airplane flight was in 1903. The Wright brothers from the U.S. And then people thought, wow, airplanes. And then in the Second World War, the devastation that was wrought by airplanes dropping bombs, right, especially in England and Germany. The air war between. Two times. Germany challenged Great Britain for supremacy. The German and both times was defeated, but they recovered. So you have to give them a lot of credit. Very talented people. Awful lot of German immigrants to the United States. My father was very proud of his German background, of course, which I have as well. Hardworking people, talented people, dedicated to education. That's why the Nazi period is kind of troubling. Like, how could this happen? How could the Germans? But the thing is, I guess what it shows is any people really could become involved in radical, crazy politics or even evil politics, especially if there's severe hardships, which the Germans experienced after the First World War in the 1920s, when their money became worthless. What could be worse than that? You have your life savings, you work all your life, and then when you get old, you have no money because of inflation. It appears we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Good luck with your own efforts in scholarship and learning if you're interested in pursuing history. There's always so much to learn and more to learn. So anyway, God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.